The mansion stood as a monument of wealth and grandeur, its towering pillars and golden gates giving the impression that nothing dark could ever lurk behind its walls. Chandeliers glittered above every corridor, their crystals catching the light like thousands of stars frozen mid-shimmer. The marble floors stretched endlessly, polished so perfectly they reflected the images of those who dared to walk across them. Expensive wine lined the cellar shelves, imported from the finest vineyards of Europe, while rare paintings adorned the walls, each a symbol of Adrian Blackwood's vast fortune and taste for exclusivity. To outsiders, this home was a palace, a dream of opulence and power, but inside, beneath the shine, the air trembled with unease. Elena, Adrian's wife, moved quietly through those same grand halls, her steps slow and graceful, her hands resting on the gentle curve of her swollen belly. The glow of pregnancy should have brought her joy, but instead it highlighted her fragility, like a porcelain doll placed carelessly in a storm. Her beauty was undeniable: soft features, delicate eyes, and a kind presence that once filled the mansion with warmth. Yet now she walked in silence, carrying the weight of loneliness that no diamonds or wealth could mend. She knew her place in her husband's life had shifted. She was still his wife, still the mother of his unborn child, but she no longer occupied the center of his world. Someone else had taken that place. Selina, the mistress, was everything Elena was not: sharp, arrogant, and unashamed. She moved through the mansion as if she owned it, her heels clicking defiantly against the marble floors. She flaunted her relationship with Adrian openly, slipping her arm through his at dinners, whispering into his ear while servants pretended not to notice. She wore her power like a crown, smirking whenever Elena entered the room, as though victory had already been claimed. To Selina, Elena was nothing more than a shadow, a fading presence that needed to be erased entirely. The servants, loyal but wary, exchanged subtle glances whenever the two women crossed paths. They whispered in corners, their voices hushed but laced with fear, sensing the growing storm. They knew the tension was more than simple rivalry, it was dangerous. The mistress's smile carried cruelty, and her gaze lingered on Elena far too long, as though plotting her disappearance. The chandeliers glittered above them all, hiding the darkness weaving its way through the mansion, foreshadowing the cruelty that Selina was already preparing in silence. Behind the polished doors of the mansion, the illusion of perfection crumbled piece by piece. To the outside world, Adrian Blackwood was a devoted husband, a man who had built a life of unimaginable wealth and charm, but inside those walls, the distance between him and Elena had grown into a canyon too wide to cross. Their conversations had dwindled to polite exchanges, her soft words often met with his distracted nods. The long dinners that once carried laughter and quiet affection were now heavy with silence, broken only by the clink of silver against porcelain. Elena tried to hold on to the fragments of their love, but each attempt left her more hollow, as if she were clutching at smoke. She carried his child, the very legacy he had once spoken of with pride, yet instead of cherishing her, he seemed blind to her suffering. Adrian spent more nights away, caught up in business or, more truthfully, tangled in the intoxicating web Selina had spun around him. The mistress knew how to stroke his ego, how to feed his hunger for power, and how to turn his gaze away from the woman who had once been his anchor. Whenever Elena sought his comfort, hoping he might place a hand on her growing belly or whisper reassurances of their shared future, he found excuses. The neglect was not loud or violent. It was quiet and cutting, the kind of cruelty that left deeper scars because it came from the man she loved most. Selina thrived on Elena's suffering. She knew the wife was fragile, both in body and spirit, and she used every opportunity to exploit it. She slipped poison into conversations, murmuring to Adrian that Elena was too emotional, too weak, too consumed by her pregnancy to remain by his side as the perfect partner he deserved. She laughed in Elena's presence, a cruel, mocking sound that turned the air icy, and sometimes, when no one was looking, she would nudge a glass near the edge of the table or step too close in passing, as if to remind Elena that she could tip her world into chaos at any moment. For Elena, each day became a test of endurance. She bore the humiliation of watching Selina bask in the spotlight of Adrian's attention while she herself faded into the background of her own home. Yet in her heart, a flicker of hope remained, that somehow, Adrian would see through Selina's manipulation, that he would remember the vows they had spoken and the life they had dreamed of together. She touched her belly often, whispering promises to the child growing inside her, assuring herself that she was not alone, that her love still had meaning. But late at night, when the halls were quiet and she lay awake in their vast bed, tears slipped silently down her cheeks, betraying the truth she dared not speak. Her marriage was breaking, and the man she loved was letting it shatter without a fight. Selina's thoughts were consumed by envy, though she never let it show when Adrian was near. To him, she was the picture of elegance and confidence, the woman who could stand beside a millionaire without ever shrinking in his shadow. But when her eyes landed on Elena, every trace of composure cracked inside her, replaced by a venomous hatred she could not suppress. She despised the softness in Elena's gaze, the quiet dignity she carried even as she endured humiliation. Selina told herself it wasn't beauty she envied. She believed she outshone Elena in every way. It was the one thing she could not steal, Elena's bond to Adrian through the unborn child she carried. That child was a constant reminder that Selina was, at least for now, a mistress in name only, not the wife who would hold the man entirely. Her arrogance, however, masked a deep insecurity. Whenever Adrian spoke of responsibility or glanced briefly at Elena, Selina's chest tightened with fear that he might one day wake from the spell she had cast. In her private moments, she paced like a predator caged in silk, replaying every detail of their encounters. She reminded herself again and again that she had to eliminate Elena, not just from the mansion, but from Adrian's heart and mind completely. To do so, she sharpened her cruelty into subtle weapons. Around the servants, she whispered things that spread like smoke, painting Elena as unstable and hysterical. She would sigh dramatically in Adrian's presence, remarking on how tiring it must be to care for someone so delicate. Her words dripped with sweetness, yet carried enough venom to sink into Adrian's thoughts. When Elena entered the room, Selina's smirk lingered just long enough for the servants to notice, fueling the quiet gossip that already buzzed through the household. But her plots did not end with words. She orchestrated moments to humiliate Elena, arriving late at dinners where Elena had waited, intentionally brushing against Adrian in front of her, whispering promises that only he could hear. Each action was small enough to appear innocent, yet heavy enough to chip away at Elena's spirit. The rivalry was unspoken but constant, an invisible war waged in glances and tones, one in which Selina thrived. Still, for all her arrogance, there was desperation behind her schemes. At night, lying in Adrian's arms, she would trace patterns on his chest and wonder whether he thought of his wife, whether the child in Elena's womb tethered him more strongly than passion ever could. These thoughts tormented her until she could no longer bear them. Her obsession became dangerous, driving her to imagine Elena's absence, to picture the mansion without her presence, to savor the idea of Adrian being hers alone. She told herself she wasn't cruel, only practical, only taking what she deserved. Yet deep down, she knew the truth. She hated Elena not for her weakness, but for her strength. For the quiet endurance that kept her standing, for the child that symbolized a future Selina could never give. And so, with each passing day, Selina's obsession tightened like a knot, pulling her closer to a decision that would forever change the fate of them all. The storm arrived as if summoned by fate, rolling clouds swallowing the moonlight until the mansion's sprawling grounds lay cloaked in darkness. Rain lashed against the tall windows, thunder rattling the chandeliers that glittered above empty corridors. It was on such a night that Elena felt most alone, her heart aching for the warmth Adrian once gave so freely. She sat in her chamber, her hands resting protectively on her belly, listening to the distant murmur of voices echoing down the hallway. She recognized Adrian's tone, sharp and heavy with frustration, and another voice, smooth and theatrical, Selina's. Drawn by instinct, Elena rose and crept silently toward the sound. At the edge of the grand staircase, she paused, her breath shallow, straining to hear. "You don't need her, Adrian," Selina whispered fiercely, her words cutting through the thunder. "She is weak. She drains you. You deserve someone who lifts you higher." Adrian's voice carried a hint of hesitation. "Selina, you don't understand. She's carrying my child." Selina's laugh was sharp, cold, echoing off the marble walls. "That child is an anchor, not a gift. You are too blinded by duty to see how she cages you." Elena clutched the banister, her heart pounding. Every word sliced her, yet beneath the pain, fear stirred. Selina was no longer hiding her disdain, she was bold, reckless, openly belittling the very woman whose place she coveted. The argument grew tense, Selina's voice alternating between seduction and cruelty, until Adrian stormed away, his footsteps fading into another wing of the mansion. Selina remained in the hallway, her face set in a smirk that did not fade even after she was left alone. Elena turned to retreat, but the floor creaked beneath her weight, and in an instant Selina's eyes flicked upward, locking onto hers. For a fleeting second, the mask of charm disappeared, replaced by raw hatred. "Spying now," Selina said coolly, stepping forward. Her tone carried no pretense. "Pathetic." Elena swallowed her fear and stepped back, clutching her stomach as if the gesture alone could protect her. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered, her voice trembling but steady enough to carry. Selina tilted her head, studying her as one might study prey. "Because you don't belong here. You never did. And soon, everyone will see it." Before Elena could respond, Selina's phone buzzed. She turned sharply, retreating into the shadows of the hallway, her voice dropping low as she spoke to someone on the other end. Elena couldn't catch every word, but phrases drifted through the storm's howl. "Tonight, take care of it. No witnesses." The hair on the back of Elena's neck rose. The storm outside felt like a mirror to the one unraveling inside the mansion. Selina's intentions, once cloaked in smirks and whispers, now carried a dangerous edge. For the first time, Elena felt certain that her rival's cruelty was not limited to humiliation. There was something darker ahead, something that would demand more than dignity to survive. The rain had slowed into a steady drizzle by the time Selina slipped quietly into Elena's chamber. The storm had left the mansion hushed, the usual warmth of candlelight replaced by shadows that seemed to cling to every corner. Elena sat in bed, propped against silk pillows, her face pale from restless thoughts. She looked up, startled when the door opened without a knock. Selina stepped inside, her silhouette sharp against the dim corridor light. "We need to talk," she said softly, her tone unusually calm, almost tender. Elena frowned, instinctively protective of her belly as she shifted upright. "At this hour?" Selina smiled faintly, a smile that did not touch her eyes. "Yes. It can't wait. Adrian has gone to the study. I thought we could clear the air, just the two of us." Something about her tone sent a shiver through Elena, yet against her better judgment, she nodded. Perhaps it was hope that at last Selina might let her guard down, that maybe some truce could be reached. Pulling her shawl over her shoulders, Elena rose slowly, every movement careful under the weight of her pregnancy. Selina led her through the silent hallways, her heels muffled on the carpet, her posture straight and commanding. Elena trailed behind, her heart beating faster with every turn. The corridors felt longer than usual, the portraits of stern ancestors seeming to watch as they passed. They reached a side door near the servants' wing, one Elena rarely used. "Why here?" Elena asked softly. Selina turned, her smile wider now, almost cruel. "Privacy. Isn't that what you want?" Before Elena could reply, Selina's hand shot out, shoving her hard. Elena gasped as she stumbled through the open doorway, into the chill night air that smelled faintly of rain and iron. She barely had time to cry out before a rough hand grabbed her from behind. A figure, broad-shouldered, face hidden under a cap, clamped a rag over her mouth. The sharp stench of damp cloth filled her nose as panic surged. "No!" Elena screamed, her voice muffled. She twisted, struggling against her captor, but her strength was no match. Selina stood just inside the doorway, arms folded, her expression cold, watching the scene unfold like a queen surveying a servant's work. "Put her in," Selina ordered. Beside the servants' quarters, a garbage truck idled, its engine rumbling low. The driver jumped down, pulling open the back hatch. Elena's eyes widened with terror as she realized where this nightmare was leading. "Please," she sobbed, her voice breaking. "I'm carrying a child. Adrian's child." Selina's lips curled into a smirk. "That's exactly the problem, darling. The men shoved Elena toward the open maw of the truck. She fought, kicking wildly, her hands grasping at the edges of the doorway. Her nails scraped against cold metal, leaving trails of blood. Every instinct screamed at her to protect her unborn child, to fight until her last breath. Tears blurred her vision, mixing with the rain as she begged for mercy. Selina stepped closer, her perfume cutting through the stench of the night. She leaned down, her voice a whisper meant only for Elena. "This is where you belong. Trash belongs with trash." With a final shove, Elena fell inside. The metal walls rang with the impact as she landed hard, pain shooting through her body. She cried out, clutching her stomach, desperate to shield the fragile life within. The doors slammed shut, plunging her into darkness. The engine roared louder as the truck jolted forward, carrying her away into the night. Above the sound of the departing vehicle, Selina's laughter echoed, a sharp, cruel sound that lingered long after the truck disappeared into the storm. From the balcony of his study, Adrian Blackwood stood with a glass of wine in his hand, watching the rain slick over the stone pathways of his estate. The storm had broken his concentration, dragging his eyes away from the figures scribbled across financial reports and into the restless night. For weeks he had been wrestling with an unease he could not name. Selina's beauty and charm had once dazzled him, blinding him to everything else, but lately, whispers among the servants and the quiet, sorrowful glances of his wife had begun to haunt him. He told himself he was imagining it, that Elena was safe, that Selina was only ambitious, never cruel. But tonight, something gnawed at him, urging him to linger by the balcony instead of retreating to his desk. That was when he saw it. Down below, near the servants' wing, shadows shifted against the dim light. He leaned forward, his heart tightening as two men emerged, dragging a frail figure between them. At first, he could not see clearly through the rain, but then the faint glow from a lantern struck Elena's face. Her pale skin, her terrified eyes, her hands struggling to protect the curve of her belly. Adrian's wine glass slipped from his hand, shattering against the marble floor. His breath caught in his throat as realization crashed over him. It was not a nightmare. It was his wife being forced toward the rumbling garbage truck waiting in the shadows. And just a step behind, calm as though she orchestrated the rain itself, was Selina. For a moment Adrian could not move. His body trembled with disbelief. He had known Selina was manipulative, perhaps even cruel, but to see her standing there with satisfaction etched across her face, watching as his wife was shoved like refuse into the metal belly of a garbage truck, his mind rebelled against it. Guilt surged hot and sharp. He had let this happen. He had turned away from Elena's pain, dismissing it as weakness, when all along she had been trying to survive under Selina's cruelty. Adrian gripped the balcony rail so hard his knuckles whitened. Every instinct screamed at him to rush down, to tear Selina apart with his bare hands. But another part of him, the part that had built empires and crushed rivals, knew he needed clarity, control. If he acted rashly, Elena could be lost forever. He forced himself to breathe, to think, to move swiftly but silently. Leaving the balcony, he stormed down the back stairs, his footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. His pulse thundered in his ears as he slipped through the shadows of the mansion and out into the rain-soaked night. By the time he reached the driveway, the garbage truck had begun to roll forward, its headlights cutting weakly through the mist. Adrian's car roared to life, tires skidding against wet stone as he pulled onto the road. He followed the truck at a distance, his grip tight on the wheel, his jaw clenched in fury. Every bump in the road made his chest ache, imagining what Elena must be enduring inside that metal prison. He could almost hear her muffled screams, see her fragile body curled protectively around the child he had neglected to cherish. Selina, oblivious to his pursuit, remained behind at the mansion, no doubt reveling in her victory. Adrian's eyes burned with rage at the thought. He had allowed her too much power, too much influence over his life. That ended tonight. But first, he had to save Elena. Rain battered the windshield as the truck rumbled ahead, its red taillights glowing like malevolent eyes in the darkness. Adrian pressed harder on the accelerator, determination cutting through the storm. He would not fail her again. He would follow the truck to the very ends of the city if he had to. Somewhere inside that steel coffin was the woman he had sworn to love, the child he had helped create, and for the first time in a long while, Adrian knew with painful clarity that nothing, no mistress, no betrayal, no storm, mattered more than saving them. Inside the garbage truck, darkness pressed down like a suffocating weight. The air was thick with the stench of rotting waste, sour and damp, clinging to Elena's skin and filling her lungs until each breath became a struggle. She lay crumpled against the cold, metal floor, her body aching from the fall. For a moment she could not move, stunned and disoriented, but then the rumble of the engine vibrated beneath her and panic seized her heart. The reality crashed in. She was trapped, shut away like something disposable, carried away into the night. Her hands instinctively clutched her belly, desperate to shield the life within her. The baby shifted faintly, reminding her that she was not alone, that she had to keep fighting no matter the odds. "Please, not like this," she whispered into the darkness, her voice breaking as tears slid down her cheeks. She dragged herself upright, her palms scraping against rust and grime as she tried to find something, anything, that could help her escape. But there was nothing. Only the hollow clang of the walls around her, closing her in like a coffin. Fear clawed at her throat, threatening to steal her strength, but another thought cut through the terror. Adrian. Would he even notice she was gone? Would he care, or had Selena's lies buried every trace of love he once felt? She tried to push those doubts away, forcing herself to focus on survival. She banged against the metal with her fists, the sound echoing like thunder in the chamber, but the roar of the engine drowned her out. Her strength wavered. Each jolt of the truck sent pain searing through her body, every bump threatening the fragile life inside her. Yet just as despair threatened to consume her, something inside her hardened. She would not let Selena win. She would not let her child be silenced before it ever drew breath. Summoning every ounce of courage, Elena screamed, the sound raw and desperate, her fists pounding against the walls until her knuckles bled. The driver outside frowned at the faint noise, glancing in the rearview mirror, but the storm's roar swallowed the sound before it reached his ears. Still, Elena refused to stop. Her voice cracked, her body trembled, but she kept fighting, each cry a declaration that she was still alive. In the distance, headlights gleamed faintly on the wet road, drawing closer with each passing moment. Elena could not see them, but her screams seemed to pierce the night, as if carried beyond the steel walls to someone who mattered. Adrian's car pressed forward through the rain, his eyes fixed on the truck ahead, his heart pounding with dread. Inside, Elena collapsed back against the floor, her body shaking with exhaustion. Her throat was raw, her hands bruised, but the fire in her chest burned stronger than ever. "I won't give up," she whispered fiercely into the darkness, rocking gently as if speaking to her child. "I'll fight, for both of us." And though she could not yet know it, her struggle had already reached the one man who could save her. The garbage truck slowed as it reached a narrow clearing on the outskirts of the city, its headlights cutting weakly across puddles shimmering under the rain. The engine rumbled to a halt, the sudden silence deafening after the long, jarring ride. Elena lay motionless inside, her breath shallow, her body trembling with fatigue and fear. She heard footsteps crunching on wet gravel, muffled voices, and then the clank of metal as the back latch creaked open. Selena stood just beyond the beam of the headlights, an umbrella shielding her from the drizzle. Her figure was poised, elegant, as if she had not orchestrated a crime but merely arrived for a performance. Her lips curved into a smile when she saw Elena's pale face peeking through the gloom. "Perfect," she murmured. "Exactly as planned." But before her triumph could blossom, another sound split the night, the roar of a car skidding into the clearing. Tires splashed through the puddles as Adrian's sleek black vehicle came to a stop, its headlights blazing across the scene. The men froze, startled, and Selena's smile faltered for the first time. Adrian stepped out into the rain, his expression a storm fiercer than the weather. His eyes locked on Elena first, her fragile body curled inside the truck, her hands trembling as she tried to rise. The sight shattered something in him. Rage surged, not only at Selena but at himself, at every moment he had ignored Elena's suffering. Then his gaze shifted to the mistress, and the fury in his eyes burned like fire. "Selena," he said, his voice low and shaking with suppressed violence. "What have you done?" Selina recovered quickly, forcing a laugh, tilting her head as though amused. "Adrian. Darling, you shouldn't be here. This is a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" His voice thundered across the clearing. "I saw you. I watched you order them to throw my wife, my pregnant wife, into a garbage truck like she was nothing. Do you think I'm blind?" Selina's mask cracked, though only for a moment. She stepped forward, her tone switching to pleading. "I did it for you. Can't you see? She's a weight dragging you down. You deserve freedom, Adrian. You deserve me." Adrian's fists clenched at his sides. "You call this love? Watching her suffer? Trying to kill the mother of my child?" The men shifted uneasily, glancing at one another, uncertain whether to flee or await orders. Selina, realizing her hold was slipping, grew desperate. She reached for Adrian's arm, her nails digging into his sleeve. "You'll thank me one day. With her gone, it's just us. No obligations. No weakness." Adrian shoved her back with such force that she stumbled into the mud, her umbrella tumbling to the ground. He turned toward the truck, rushing to Elena, his hands trembling as he helped her down. She collapsed against him, sobbing, her body weak but alive. He held her tightly, shielding her from the rain, whispering words of comfort he should have spoken long ago. When he looked up again, his fury was absolute. Selina scrambled to her feet, mud streaking her dress, her eyes wide with disbelief. For the first time, she realized she had lost, not just Adrian, but everything she had schemed for. "You're finished," Adrian said coldly. "Get out of my sight before I destroy you myself." Selina's lips trembled, her arrogance crumbling into desperation. But Adrian no longer cared. His arms remained around Elena, his focus entirely on her, the woman he had almost lost forever. The mistress who thought herself untouchable now stood broken in the rain, watching as the man she desired turned his back on her completely. Elena clung to Adrian with what little strength remained, her face buried against his chest, tears mixing with the rain that poured over them. For the first time in months, she felt his arms wrap around her with urgency, not indifference. He held her as though she were the most precious thing in the world, as though he finally remembered what he had almost thrown away. His voice shook when he whispered against her hair. "I've got you, Elena. You're safe now. I swear to you, I won't let anything happen to you or our child." Her sobs came in waves, quiet but fierce, as the weight of her ordeal crashed down on her. She could barely find the words to answer him, her body trembling not just from fear but from the relief of knowing she was not abandoned after all. "I thought you didn't care anymore," she managed to whisper. "I thought she had taken you from me completely." Adrian pulled back just enough to look into her eyes, his own filled with raw regret. "I was blind. Foolish. I let her poison me against you. I forgot the promises I made to you, the life we dreamed of together. I will never forgive myself for that." His hand rested gently on her belly, the faintest tremor in his touch as he felt the life growing inside her. "But I swear to you, from this moment on, I'll make it right." The servants who had followed the commotion from a distance now rushed forward, their faces pale with shock as they took in the scene. The truck, the trembling mistress in the mud, and Elena clinging to Adrian's side. Murmurs spread among them, their loyalty shifting firmly as they realized who had truly been wronged. Some reached out to help steady Elena, draping a cloak over her soaked shoulders, while others glared openly at Selina, who stood frozen, her arrogance shattered. Adrian guided Elena toward his car, every step cautious, as though she might break under his touch. She leaned into him, her body weak but her spirit still holding on, her eyes closing briefly as she allowed herself, at last, to rest in the comfort of his presence. Every detail, the warmth of his hand, the steady beat of his heart, the protective way he shielded her from the rain, felt like a promise that he was hers again, not Selina's. "I was so afraid," Elena whispered once more as he settled her gently into the car seat. "For the baby, for us. I thought I'd never see you again." Adrian cupped her face tenderly, rain dripping from his hair onto her cheeks. I nearly lost everything tonight. I won't make that mistake again. You and our child are all that matter now." His voice cracked, heavy with remorse and resolve. "You are my wife. My only love. I see that now more clearly than ever." As the car door closed softly, the sound of the storm faded into the background. For Elena, the nightmare was not yet erased, but in Adrian's arms she felt the fragile beginning of hope, the possibility of healing. Redemption had come at a terrible cost, but it had come nonetheless, and for the first time in so long, she allowed herself to believe in their future again. Selina stood in the rain like a statue cracked in half, her once flawless dress clinging to her body, mud streaking across the silk. The servants kept their distance, but their eyes bore into her with silent condemnation. The power she had flaunted so arrogantly only hours before was gone, slipping through her fingers like water she could no longer grasp. Still, she tried to summon her mask, her chin lifting as she forced a smile that wavered at the edges. "This is all a mistake," she said, her voice trembling despite her attempt at composure. She stepped forward, reaching toward Adrian, her fingers outstretched as if she could still reel him back. "She's lying. You don't know what she's capable of. She staged this, Adrian. Don't let her trick you." Adrian turned, his jaw set in stone, his arm still protectively wrapped around Elena. His voice was calm, but it carried a sharpness that cut through the storm. "Enough. I saw everything, Selina. With my own eyes. You arranged this. You wanted her gone." The servants gasped softly at his words, their fears confirmed. Selina's smile collapsed into desperation. She shook her head violently, rain spraying from her hair as her voice rose into a shrill cry. "No. You don't understand. I did it for us. For you, Adrian. She's weak, she doesn't deserve you. I was only clearing the path so we could finally be together, without her holding you back." Her confession spilled into the night like poison, undeniable and raw. Adrian's gaze hardened. "You call this love? Love doesn't destroy. Love doesn't push a woman carrying a child into a truck like garbage." He stepped closer, his fury barely restrained. "What you've done is unforgivable. You will never step foot in my life again." Selina's face twisted, her arrogance collapsing into rage. She lunged forward, her voice breaking. "You'll regret this, Adrian. Without me, you're nothing. She'll drag you down, and you'll come crawling back. You'll see." But her threats sounded hollow, her figure small against the vast mansion behind them. The servants moved closer, some holding her back as she thrashed in the mud, her dignity gone. Their whispers, once filled with fear of her sharp tongue, now carried disgust and relief. The queen of the house had fallen, and no one would mourn her downfall. Adrian turned away from her completely, his focus fixed only on Elena, who leaned weakly against him, her eyes still brimming with tears. "Come," he whispered to his wife, guiding her toward the car that waited to take them away from this nightmare. "She has no power here anymore." Selina's voice followed them, a broken cry lost in the storm. "Adrian, please, don't leave me like this." But there was no answer, no second glance. The man she had fought so ruthlessly to claim was gone, his love and loyalty returned to the woman she had tried to destroy. As the car pulled away, its taillights glowing red against the wet road, Selina collapsed onto her knees, the rain washing over her like cold judgment. The mansion that had once been her stage now loomed above her as a fortress she would never enter again. She had plotted, schemed, and nearly succeeded, but in the end, her cruelty had undone her. The mistress who thought she could steal everything had been left with nothing, only the bitter taste of defeat in the rain.